Welcome, dear listener, to another journey through history's most fascinating corners. If you're settling in for the night, adjusting your pillow, perhaps dimming the lights just so, you've come to the right place. Tonight, we're traveling somewhere truly extraordinary, though I should warn you, it's not a trip you'd want to take in person. No, this particular destination requires blood, ritual, cosmic anxiety, and an unwavering belief that the universe might simply stop working if you miss your morning prayers. We're heading to the Aztec Empire, specifically to Tenochtitlan, that remarkable island city in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Picture it, if you will, a metropolis of perhaps 200,000 souls, laced with canals like Venice, crowned with step pyramids that caught the morning sun, surrounded by floating gardens that seemed to defy the very laws of agriculture. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and absolutely terrifying in ways that would exhaust you within hours of arrival. You see, the Aztecs had a rather specific understanding of how the cosmos worked. They believed, quite seriously, that the sun needed human blood to rise each morning. Not metaphorically, mind you, actually, literally needed it. The sun god Huitzilopochtli was locked in an eternal struggle with darkness, and without constant nourishment from human sacrifice, he would lose his strength, fail in his battle, and the world would simply end. No sunrise, no life, no universe, just eternal darkness and the collapse of everything. Now imagine living with that knowledge every single day. Imagine waking up knowing that your civilization is engaged in a desperate cosmic maintenance program, where human hearts are the fuel that keeps reality itself running. It's rather like knowing your car needs oil changes, except the stakes are infinitely higher and the oil is people. This creates what we might call a high-pressure religious environment. But before we dive into the blood and ritual, let me make you comfortable. Tonight's journey will take us through 4 distinct segments. First, we'll experience a day in the life of an ordinary Aztec believer, someone trying to navigate the exhausting demands of a religion that permeated every waking moment. Then we'll meet Moctezuma Tsend, the emperor who had the misfortune of ruling when cosmic prophecy collided with Spanish conquistadors. After that, we'll unravel the mysteries of the Aztec calendar systems, those intricate wheels of time that still puzzle scholars today. Finally, we'll peek into the lives of the priests and nobles, the religious elite who orchestrated this grand cosmic drama. Throughout this journey, I invite you to relax. Let your breathing slow. The content is fascinating, yes, but delivered at a pace designed for rest. If you drift off, wonderful. If you stay awake, equally wonderful. We're in no hurry here. The Aztecs were in a hurry, constantly racing to satisfy gods, interpret omens, and keep the universe from collapsing. But you, dear listener, are safely in your own time, your own bed, with no cosmic obligations whatsoever. And here's something delightfully ironic. The Aztecs believed their civilization would last forever, that their careful rituals would sustain the cosmos indefinitely. They built their city on an island in a lake because an eagle perched on a cactus told them to. They constructed temples that scraped the sky, carved stone calendars the size of houses, developed complex agricultural systems that could feed hundreds of thousands. They thought they were indestructible. They were wrong, of course, spectacularly wrong, but the confidence was admirable. Before we begin properly, I should mention, if you find this video helpful, do consider subscribing to Religious Stories for Sleep. Leave a comment letting me know which historical period you'd like to explore next. Give the video a like if you're so inclined. These small gestures help us create more of these lengthy nocturnal journeys through history's stranger corners. Now then, let's step into Tenochtitlan. The sun is rising over the lake, painting the water gold and pink. The air is cool, carrying the scent of maize cooking and copal incense burning. Temple drums begin their rhythmic thunder, and somewhere in this magnificent, anxious city, an ordinary person is waking up, facing another day of trying to keep the gods happy. Shall we join them? You wake before dawn, which isn't a choice, really. It's an obligation. The morning star is visible through the doorway of your modest home, and that means work begins. Not the work of farming or crafting or trading, mind you. That comes later. First comes the work of religion, which never, ever stops. Your first task is bloodletting. Yes, bloodletting. Before breakfast, before even fully waking up. You take a maguey thorn, sterilized in fire the night before, and you pierce your earlobe. Just a small puncture, nothing dramatic. You catch the blood on a piece of bark paper. This blood, your blood, is an offering to the gods. It's expected. It's normal. Everyone does it. Children learn how from the age of 5 or 6. By the time you're an adult, scarred earlobes are simply part of the landscape of being human. You burn the blood-soaked paper in a small ceramic bowl, watching the smoke rise toward the lightening sky. The smoke carries your offering upward to the gods. You whisper a prayer, something formulaic and practiced, asking for protection, for the sun to rise, for your crops to grow, for your family to stay healthy. It's intimate and impersonal all at once. You've done this thousands of times. So has everyone else. And here's the exhausting part. You're never done. This morning ritual is just the beginning. Throughout the day, you'll need to observe dozens of other small religious requirements. Before eating, you flick a few drops of food toward the earth, an offering to Tlaltekutli, the earth goddess. When you pass a temple, you pause. Touch the ground. Touch your fingers to your lips. When you see a priest, you lower your eyes respectfully. When the temple drums sound, which they do constantly throughout the day, you stop whatever you're doing and turn toward the sound, acknowledging the ritual being performed somewhere in the ceremonial center. The mental load is staggering. Imagine trying to remember all the feast days, all the unlucky days, all the days when certain activities are forbidden. The Aztec calendar system, which we'll explore in detail later, includes multiple overlapping cycles. Some days are favorable for planting, others for traveling, others for doing absolutely nothing important because the cosmic forces are misaligned and disaster lurks in every significant action. You need to know these things. Everyone needs to know these things. Ignorance isn't an excuse. The gods don't care that you forgot. Let's say it's a regular work day, not a feast day, not an unlucky day. You head out to your chinampas, those remarkable floating gardens built on the lake's shallow waters. The work is physically demanding, but beautifully efficient. The Aztecs engineered these artificial islands by weaving reeds into massive mats, piling lake mud on top, anchoring them with willow trees whose roots grew down into the lake bed. The result was incredibly fertile agricultural land that produced multiple crops per year. You're tending maize, beans, squash, the holy trinity of Mesoamerican agriculture. The sun climbs higher. The work is hot, muddy, repetitive. Your back aches. Your hands are calloused. But even here, even while working, you're aware of the religious dimension of everything. The maize isn't just food, it's sacred. The goddess Chicomecoatl watches over it. You whisper thanks as you harvest. You apologize when you accidentally damage a plant. Everything is alive. Everything is watched. Everything matters to someone, or something beyond yourself. Around midday, the drums begin again, louder this time. You know what that means. A sacrifice is being performed at the Templo Mayor, the great twin pyramid at the city's heart. You can't see it from where you are, but you can hear it. Everyone can hear it. The drums, the chanting, the shell trumpets. You don't stop working, but you mutter a quick prayer. The sacrifice is necessary. You know this. You've been told this your entire life. The sun needs blood. Huitzilopochtli needs strength. Without sacrifice, the universe ends. It's that simple, that terrible, that absolute. Here's where we need to pause and discuss something uncomfortable. The Aztecs practiced human sacrifice on a scale that still shocks historians. Thousands of people per year, possibly tens of thousands in exceptional years, were sacrificed across the empire. Most were war captives, some were slaves, some were volunteers who saw sacrifice as the highest honor. The methods varied. Heart extraction was most common, but also decapitation, drowning, burning, arrow sacrifice, gladiatorial combat where the outcome was predetermined. From our modern perspective, this seems monstrous, but from the Aztec perspective, it was necessary, even merciful. They genuinely believed the universe would collapse without it. They believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the current world, and humans owed them blood in return. They believed the sacrificed went directly to paradise, bypassing the usual complex journey through the underworld. They believed this so deeply that parents sometimes volunteered their children for sacrifice at certain ceremonies, considering it the highest honor their family could achieve. You, as an ordinary citizen, don't perform these sacrifices. That's the job of trained priests, but you witness them, or hear them, or know they're happening. They're part of the background radiation of life. The city's whole ceremonial calendar revolves around them, and you support them, not grudgingly, but genuinely, because you share the same cosmological terror. If we stop, everything ends. The afternoon brings different challenges. Let's say a merchant passes through your neighborhood, returning from distant lands. He brings news, and news in the Aztec world is always potentially ominous. Perhaps he saw an unusual bird while traveling. Perhaps he encountered a coyote that behaved strangely. Perhaps he dreamed of water flowing upward. These things matter. These things are omens. The Aztecs were obsessed with omens, reading cosmic significance into everything from animal behavior to weather patterns to chance encounters. You gather with neighbors to hear the merchant's tales. Someone mentions that their neighbor's dog howled 3 times last night. Someone else remembers that an owl perched on their roof the week before. These details are collected, discussed, worried over. Are the gods trying to communicate something? Is disaster coming? Should you consult a priest? Should you make an extra offering? The anxiety is real and constant. You're trying to read messages in a language you barely understand, knowing that misinterpretation could mean catastrophe. Evening arrives. You return home exhausted, not just physically but mentally. The constant vigilance, the perpetual awareness of cosmic forces, the need to maintain ritual purity and proper observances while also farming and working and raising children and maintaining your home. It's relentless. You prepare the evening meal, careful to make the proper offerings before eating. You watch the sunset. that daily miracle that only happens because enough blood was shed today. Before sleep, more prayers. You pray to Tezcatlipoca, the capricious god of fate and sorcery, asking him not to notice you. You pray to Tlaloc, the rain god, asking for favorable weather. You pray to household deities whose names are specific to your family. You check that your children did their bloodletting that morning. You make sure the small shrine in your home has fresh offerings. And then, finally, you lie down on your reed mat, pulling a rough cotton blanket over yourself. But even sleep isn't entirely yours. Dreams matter in Aztec culture. They're communications from the divine realm, and they need to be remembered and interpreted. So even in sleep, you're not fully released from religious obligation. You need to pay attention to your dreams, remember them, decode them, respond to them. A bad dream might require consultation with a priest. A good dream might demand a thanksgiving offering. Even unconsciousness is part of the cosmic conversation. And here's the truly exhausting part. You can never be certain you're doing enough. The gods are not benevolent in the Christian sense. They're powerful, capricious, demanding, and easily offended. They might punish you for infractions you didn't know you committed. They might visit disaster on your city because someone somewhere failed in their duties. Individual virtue doesn't protect you. Collective vigilance is required, and collective vigilance means trusting that everyone else is also fulfilling their obligations. Consider the psychological weight of this. You live in a world where natural disasters, diseases, crop failures, military defeats, and personal misfortunes are all interpreted as divine punishment. If your child gets sick, you wonder what you did wrong, which ritual you neglected, which god you offended. If drought comes, the whole city wonders whether enough sacrifices were made, whether the priests performed the ceremonies correctly, whether someone secretly practiced sorcery. The Aztecs developed elaborate systems to manage this anxiety. They had professional diviners who specialized in reading omens. They had priests who performed rituals on behalf of the community. They had a legal system that punished religious infractions severely, because one person's negligence could doom everyone. Public drunkenness was sometimes punished by death, not because alcohol itself was evil, but because intoxication might cause someone to forget their ritual obligations or behave improperly before the gods. Let's talk about the big ceremonies, the ones that happened throughout the year according to the sacred calendar. Every 18 days, a major ceremony occurred, dedicated to a different deity. These weren't optional attendance situations. If you lived in or near Tenochtitlan, you were expected to witness, to participate, to demonstrate proper devotion. Some ceremonies lasted multiple days. Some required fasting beforehand. Some required specific clothing or body paint. Some required you to dance for hours in the ceremonial plaza. During the month of Tuxcatl, for example, the ceremony honored Tezcatlipoca, that unpredictable god of fate. A young man, carefully chosen and prepared for a full year, lived as the god's embodiment. He was dressed in fine clothes, given everything he desired, treated as divine. Then, at the ceremony's culmination, he climbed the temple steps and was sacrificed. This was considered the highest honor. The young man went willingly, even eagerly, knowing he would become divine. Thousands watched. Thousands participated in the surrounding rituals. The whole city stopped normal life for days. The psychological impact of witnessing these ceremonies repeatedly, year after year, from childhood onward, cannot be overstated. You were socialized into a worldview where violence was sacred, where death was necessary, where the cosmos was maintained through blood. This wasn't primitive or savage. It was sophisticated, systematic, and deeply believed. The Aztecs weren't mindless or cruel. They were terrified of cosmic collapse and desperate to prevent it. Now, imagine you're not doing well in this system. Maybe you're skeptical, though you'd never dare voice it. Maybe you forget a ritual sometimes. Maybe you're exhausted by the constant demands. What happens? Well, nothing immediately obvious. But the social pressure is immense. Your neighbors watch you. Your family judges you. The priests notice who attends ceremonies and who doesn't. Failure to demonstrate proper devotion could lead to social ostracism, economic hardship, or even legal punishment. And there's no exit. You can't decide you're not religious. You can't opt out. You can't move somewhere with a different belief system, because the Aztec Empire imposed its religious practices on conquered peoples. You're born into this system, raised in it, surrounded by it, and you'll die in it. The only question is whether you'll die of old age or whether you'll be selected for sacrifice, which, remember, is considered an honor. Let me paint you one more scene to illustrate daily life. It's a festival day, perhaps Tlacaxipehualistli, the flaying of men, dedicated to Saipetotec, the god of spring and renewal. This is one of the more disturbing ceremonies to modern sensibilities. Warriors who captured enemies in battle brought them to be sacrificed. But the sacrifice wasn't the end. The priests then flayed the bodies, removing the skin. Other priests or warriors wore these skins for 20 days, representing the renewal of the earth's vegetation, the idea of new life emerging from death. You attend this ceremony. Everyone attends. Children attend. The plaza is packed with tens of thousands of people. The smell is intense. Incense, sweat, blood, the beginning of decomposition as those skin suits age over days. You watch calmly because you've seen it before, because this is normal, because the alternative to performing this ritual is the crops failing and everyone starving. The logic is impeccable from within the worldview. It's horrifying from outside it. After the ceremony, life resumes. You return to your chinampas, your craft work, your trading. But you do so with the knowledge that the ritual was performed correctly, that the god was pleased, that the spring growing season will be successful. You feel, perhaps, a sense of relief. Another obligation fulfilled. Another crisis averted. Another 18 days secured for the universe to continue existing. The irony, of course, is that you're working yourself to death to keep a world alive that will, in just a few decades, be completely destroyed by Spanish conquest. All this ritual, all this anxiety, all this blood, and it won't matter. The gods won't save you. The universe won't end when the sacrifices stop. A different god will be imposed. A different worldview will be forced upon survivors. And the carefully maintained cosmic order you've dedicated your entire life to will simply evaporate. But you don't know that yet. You can't know it. From your perspective, inside your moment in history, the system works. The sun rises daily, the crops grow, the empire expands, the gods are satisfied. Everything you've been taught, everything you've experienced, confirms that your way of life is correct, necessary, and eternal. This is the tragedy and the fascinating element of it all. So why wouldn't you last a day as an Aztec believer? Because the mental and emotional strain would break you. Modern humans, even deeply religious ones, compartmentalize faith. You pray in the morning, perhaps, attend services weekly, and spend the rest of your time in secular pursuits. But an Aztec had no secular time. Every moment was potentially sacred or potentially dangerous. Every action had cosmic implications. Every day required blood, prayer, vigilance, and participation in a collective effort to prevent apocalypse. You'd be exhausted within hours. The constant ritual obligations, the blood, the interpreting of omens, the attendance at ceremonies, the social pressure, the fear of divine punishment, the guilt when you inevitably failed to fulfill every requirement perfectly, and all of this on top of actual physical labor, farming, building, crafting, fighting, if you were called to war. The Aztecs were remarkably tough, both physically and psychologically. They had to be. Their worldview demanded it. As you settle deeper into your bed now, in your comfortable modern world where the sun rises automatically and gods don't demand blood, take a moment to appreciate the relative simplicity of your existence. You have problems, certainly, but they're not cosmic in scale. You're not responsible for maintaining the universe. You can sleep without worrying that your dreams might be divine messages requiring interpretation. You can eat without making offerings first. You can look at an owl without wondering if it portends disaster. The Aztecs lived in a state of perpetual religious intensity that would seem unbearable to us now. Yet they created a magnificent civilization. They built cities, carved art, wrote poetry, developed mathematics and astronomy, conquered an empire. They did all of this while also maintaining an elaborate system of ritual that consumed enormous amounts of time, resources, and human lives. It's a testament to human adaptability and the power of belief. It's also a window into a psychology so foreign to our own that understanding it requires real imaginative effort. So we leave our hypothetical Aztec believers sleeping on their reed mat, dreaming dreams that might be messages from gods, in a house that might contain dozens of small household deities demanding daily attention, in a city where temple drums will wake them before dawn tomorrow for another day of cosmic maintenance. It's exhausting just to contemplate. But it was their life, their reality, their normal. In a moment, we'll move from the experience of ordinary believers to the burden carried by the emperor himself, Moctezuma II, a man who had to manage not just his own religious obligations but those of an entire empire. But before we do that, take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. Let the strangeness of what we've discussed wash over you like a gentle wave. History is full of worlds we can barely imagine, and that's precisely what makes it so endlessly fascinating. The Aztecs are gone, but their story remains, captured in stone and codex and archaeological evidence, waiting to puzzle and intrigue us across the centuries. Shall we continue to Moctezuma? He's waiting in his palace, surrounded by advisors, troubled by omens, about to make decisions that will doom his civilization. But that's for the next segment. For now, rest if you need to. The Aztecs were in a hurry. We are not. Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, Moctezuma the Younger, sits in his palace chamber, and he is afraid. This is the year 1519 in the Christian calendar, though he would call it something entirely different. Something calculated according to intricate cycles of days and years that have been running since the beginning of time itself. He is perhaps 40 years old, though exact dates are uncertain. He has been emperor, or Tlatoani, for 17 years, and he is beginning to suspect that he has been chosen by the gods not for glory, but for catastrophe. Let's be clear about something from the start. Moctezuma was not weak. He was not a coward. He was not a fool, despite what some Spanish accounts would have you believe. He was an experienced military commander who had led campaigns before becoming emperor. He was a trained priest who had performed bloodletting and ritual fasting in his youth. He was an administrator who managed an empire of perhaps 5 million people, coordinating tribute from dozens of subjugated cities, maintaining roads and communications across hundreds of miles of difficult terrain, overseeing a legal system, a religious hierarchy, and a military force that had conquered most of central Mexico. But Moctezuma lived in a universe governed by prophecy, omen, and the capricious will of gods who could destroy everything on a whim. And for the past several years, the omens had been catastrophically bad. Let's start earlier, before the Spanish arrived, when Moctezuma was still confident in his power. Picture him in the 1510s, at the height of his reign. He presides over a city of astonishing beauty and complexity. Tenochtitlan spreads across the lake, its causeways connecting it to the mainland, its aqueducts bringing fresh water from distant springs, its markets filled with goods from across the empire. The Templo Mayor rises at the city's heart, freshly renovated and expanded during Moctezuma's reign, its twin temples dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc gleaming with stucco and paint. Moctezuma's daily routine is itself a form of ritual. He wakes before dawn, as all good Aztecs do, and performs his private bloodletting. But he doesn't use a simple maguey thorn. No, he uses obsidian blades. He pierces not just his earlobes, but his tongue, his thighs, his genitals. The blood of a Tlatoani is more valuable than the blood of common people. It carries more power. The gods need it more urgently. So Moctezuma bleeds, significantly and painfully, almost every morning of his life. After bloodletting comes prayer, extensive prayer to multiple deities, then consultation with priests about the day's auspiciousness, then breakfast, but not eaten in the manner of common people. Moctezuma eats alone, screened from view, served by servants who approach him with eyes downcast. No one looks directly at the emperor. No one speaks to him unless addressed first. He is semi-divine, set apart, burdened with a cosmic responsibility that would crush lesser men. His mornings are filled with administrative duties, tribute records to review, disputes to settle, military campaigns to plan, religious ceremonies to oversee. The Aztec Empire was not a centralized state in the modern sense. It was more like a loose confederation held together by fear, tribute obligations, and military force. Conquered cities paid tribute, but maintained their own rulers. Rebellion was constant. Moctezuma had to manage this complex system, while also ensuring that all the necessary religious rituals were performed correctly across the empire. And here's where the psychological burden becomes truly staggering. Moctezuma was responsible for maintaining cosmic order. If sacrifices weren't performed correctly, if rituals were neglected, if the gods became displeased, it was his fault. The entire universe's continued existence depended on him fulfilling his religious obligations. Imagine carrying that weight every single day. Every drought, every earthquake, every military defeat, every disease outbreak, all potentially his fault for failing to please the gods adequately. The Aztecs believed they were living in the fifth sun, the fifth era of creation. The previous 4 ages had all ended in catastrophe. Jaguars devouring humanity, hurricanes destroying the world, volcanic fire raining from the sky, floods drowning everything. This current age, the age of the sun that needs blood, would also end eventually. That was certain. The question was when and whether the end could be delayed through proper ritual observance. Moctezuma knew the stories. He knew that some prophecies suggested the fifth sun would end in earthquakes, that the earth monster Tlaltecutli would rise up and consume everything. He knew that Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who had once ruled as a benevolent king before being exiled, was prophesied to return someday. He knew that Tezcatlipoca, the capricious god of fate, might simply decide on a whim to end everything. These weren't abstract theological concerns. These were real, immediate threats that required constant vigilance and ritual management. Now, let's talk about the omens. In the years before the Spanish arrived, a series of deeply disturbing events occurred. The sources vary, and some accounts may have been embellished after the fact, but the pattern is clear. Something was wrong, cosmically wrong, and everyone knew it. Around 1510, a comet appeared in the sky. Not just any comet, but a particularly bright one that appeared during the day, visible even when the sun was shining. To the Aztecs, comets were profoundly bad omens, tears in the fabric of the sky, indications of divine displeasure or impending catastrophe. Moctezuma consulted his astronomers, his priests, his diviners. They had no comforting answers. The comet was bad. Something terrible was coming. They just didn't know what. Then the temple of Huitzilopochtli caught fire. Spontaneously, according to accounts, with no apparent cause. The Templo Mayor, the most sacred building in the entire empire, the heart of Aztec religious life, simply burst into flames. The fire was intense, resistant to water. By the time it was extinguished, significant damage had been done. To Moctezuma, this was unambiguous. Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, the war god, the patron deity of the Aztecs, was either angry or abandoning them. Neither option was good. Lake Texcoco began behaving strangely. The water level rose without rain, flooding parts of the city. Then it boiled, or seemed to boil, producing strange foam and vapor. Remember, this is the lake on which the entire city is built. If the lake gods were displeased, if Tlaloc was angry, the consequences could be catastrophic. Moctezuma ordered extra sacrifices to water deities. The lake eventually calmed, but the incident left everyone shaken. A strange bird was captured and brought to Moctezuma. It had a mirror on its head, or something that looked like a mirror. When Moctezuma looked into it, he saw visions. Armed men riding on the backs of deer-like creatures approaching from the east. This detail appears in multiple accounts and was clearly significant. Moctezuma consulted his diviners about the vision. They had no explanation. When he tried to show them the bird, it had vanished. A woman's voice was heard at night, wailing through the streets of Tenochtitlan, "My children, we are lost. Where shall I take you?" This became known as the legend of La Llorona in later Mexican folklore, but in its original context, it was terrifying. A spirit, a goddess, crying out that the people were doomed. Everyone heard it. No one could explain it. Moctezuma increased sacrifices, but the wailing continued for months. People with strange deformities began appearing, or at least reports of such people reached the palace. Two-headed men, people with grotesque features, individuals who seemed to exist between the normal and the monstrous. In Aztec cosmology, such beings indicated cosmic disorder, the boundaries between different realms breaking down. These weren't just medical oddities. They were signs that the universe itself was malfunctioning. Moctezuma responded to all of this in the only way he knew how. More rituals, more sacrifices, more consultation with religious experts. He expanded the Templo Mayor, adding new shrines, increasing the frequency of ceremonies. He ordered priests to perform divination constantly, trying to read the gods' intentions. He sent scouts to the coasts, watching for strange visitors, because some prophecies suggested the danger would come from the sea. And then, in 1519, the reports began arriving. Strange towers had been seen on the eastern coast, floating on the water. Men with pale skin and thick beards had come ashore. They had animals unlike any seen before. Horses, which the Aztecs initially thought were some kind of deer. They had weapons that produced smoke and thunder, killing from a distance. They claimed to be emissaries from a great king across the ocean. Moctezuma received these reports in his palace. Imagine his state of mind. Years of omens, years of anxiety, years of ritual desperately trying to maintain cosmic order. And now this. Strange men from the east, exactly as the visions had shown, exactly as some interpretations of prophecy suggested. Were these the returning servants of Quetzalcoatl? Was this the end of the fifth sun? Was this divine judgment for some failure in ritual observance? He did what any rational person in his position would do. He sent gifts, magnificent gifts. Gold, jade, featherwork of astonishing intricacy, fine cloth, but also ritual objects, masks of the gods, sacred regalia, items that would be appropriate gifts for deities or their representatives. If these strangers were divine, the gifts would please them. If they were human, the gifts would demonstrate Aztec wealth and power, perhaps deterring aggression. The strangers accepted the gifts and asked for more. They also expressed interest in meeting Moctezuma personally. This created a profound dilemma. In Aztec protocol, the emperor did not meet with just anyone. He was semi-divine, approached with elaborate ritual, viewed only from a distance by common people. But if these strangers were also divine, or representatives of divine powers, then refusing to meet them might anger the gods. On the other hand, meeting them might legitimize their claims, might give them spiritual authority they shouldn't have. Moctezuma consulted everyone. Priests, nobles, diviners, advisors. The opinions varied wildly. Some argued for immediate military action, march an army to the coast, destroy these invaders before they could penetrate further inland. Moctezuma had the military capability. The Aztec army was massive, experienced, and had conquered most of central Mexico. Others argued for caution. If these were divine beings, attacking them would bring cosmic catastrophe. Better to observe, to learn, to try to understand what the gods wanted. Here's where we need to understand something crucial about Moctezuma's psychology. He was not paralyzed by superstition. He was trying to make rational decisions within a worldview where the supernatural was real and immediate. In his universe, gods walked the earth, omens predicted the future, and ritual determined cosmic outcomes. Ignoring these realities would have been foolish, like a modern leader ignoring scientific evidence because it contradicted their preferences. The strangers began moving inland. They were led by a man named Hernan Cortés, though Moctezuma wouldn't have known that name initially. They fought battles with coastal cities and won, despite being vastly outnumbered. They formed alliances with peoples who hated the Aztecs and chafed under tribute obligations. They moved steadily toward Tenochtitlan. Moctezuma sent more emissaries, more gifts, more messages suggesting that perhaps the strangers didn't need to come to the capital. He tried magic. Priests were sent to perform rituals that would sicken or curse the invaders. According to the chronicles, these rituals had no effect. The strangers kept coming, apparently immune to Aztec sorcery. This was deeply unsettling. If magic didn't work on them, what were they? The crisis consumed Moctezuma completely. He stopped sleeping regularly. He performed extended fasts, trying to clarify his mind, trying to receive guidance from the gods. He spent hours in prayer, in bloodletting, in consultation with priests. The administrative work of empire continued, but his focus was entirely on the approaching strangers. Everything else, tribute, military campaigns, legal disputes, became secondary to this existential crisis. His nobles grew frustrated. Some began to argue openly that the emperor was failing in his duty, that decisive military action was needed, that whatever these strangers were, they could be defeated by conventional means. But Moctezuma was caught between two impossible alternatives. If he attacked, and these were divine beings, he would doom his people. If he welcomed them, and they were merely human invaders, he would also doom his people. There was no obviously correct choice. In November 1519, Cortés and his men, along with thousands of indigenous allies from city-states hostile to the Aztecs, arrived at Tenochtitlan. Moctezuma made the fateful decision to welcome them. He went out to meet Cortés personally, carried on a litter, dressed in full imperial regalia, surrounded by the highest nobles of the empire. It was a calculated display. If these men were divine, the ceremony honored them appropriately. If they were human, the display demonstrated Aztec power and sophistication. The meeting was bizarre, a collision of utterly incompatible worldviews. Cortés spoke through translators, explaining that he represented a king across the ocean and a god named Jesus Christ. Moctezuma responded with formal speeches about Aztec history and the possibility that Cortés might be the returning Quetzalcoatl. Neither man understood the other. Not really. They were using the same words, but meaning entirely different things. Moctezuma offered the Spanish quarters in a palace compound in the heart of the city. This is often portrayed as naive, as Moctezuma inviting wolves into his home. But consider his reasoning. Keeping them close meant he could observe them, learn their intentions, discover whether they were human or divine. Leaving them outside the city meant losing control of the situation, and refusing them hospitality might anger whichever gods they served or represented. For a brief period, things seemed stable. The Spanish lived in their quarters. Moctezuma visited them regularly, and elaborate exchanges of gifts and conversation occurred. Cortés expressed interest in Aztec religion, in the temples, in the ceremonies. Moctezuma tried to explain the necessity of sacrifice, the cosmic order that required blood, the gods who demanded feeding. Cortés responded with horror and arguments about Christianity. Again, mutual incomprehension. Then Cortés made a demand. He wanted the human sacrifices to stop. To Moctezuma, this was insane. Stopping sacrifice would end the world. The sun would fail. The fifth sun would collapse. Everything would be destroyed. He tried to explain this to Cortés. Cortés didn't care. He declared that the Aztec gods were demons, that only Christ could save humanity, that the sacrifices were abominations that must cease. This created an impossible situation. Moctezuma's entire legitimacy as emperor rested on maintaining cosmic order through ritual. If he stopped the sacrifices, he would be failing in his fundamental duty. His people would lose faith in him. The gods would be enraged. Disaster would follow. But if he refused Cortés, and Cortés truly represented some new divine power, then disaster would also follow. He was trapped in a cosmological vice with no escape. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The Spanish discovered gold in the palace compound and demanded more. Tensions rose. The Spanish took Moctezuma hostage, claiming they needed to ensure their safety while they resided in the city. This is often portrayed as a dramatic kidnapping, but the reality was more complex. Moctezuma continued to govern, continued to meet with his nobles, continued to perform his imperial duties. But he was under Spanish control, and everyone knew it. His authority began to crumble. Some nobles openly questioned his leadership. How could the emperor allow these strangers to dictate terms? How could he consider stopping the sacrifices? How could he cooperate with men who insulted the gods? Moctezuma tried to maintain the balance, tried to keep cosmic order intact while also managing the Spanish presence. It was impossible. No one could have succeeded in his position. Let's pause here and consider the psychological torture Moctezuma was experiencing. He was a deeply religious man who genuinely believed in the necessity of ritual sacrifice. He was an experienced ruler who understood political and military realities. He was caught between incompatible systems of understanding reality, and every choice led to catastrophe. Attack the Spanish? Risk divine punishment and also potential military defeat, since these men seemed unkillable. Cooperate with them. Risk cosmic collapse and the loss of his people's faith. He continued to perform his private rituals, his bloodletting, his prayers. Even under Spanish guard, even in captivity, he maintained his religious obligations. He had to. If he stopped, everything would end. His personal suffering was irrelevant compared to the cosmic stakes. So he bled and he prayed, and he tried to navigate an impossible situation while the world he knew began to disintegrate around him. In the spring of 1520, while Cortés was away dealing with a rival Spanish expedition on the coast, his lieutenant Pedro de Alvarado made a catastrophic decision. During a major Aztec festival, Toxcatl, that ceremony we discussed earlier, where a young man was sacrificed as the embodiment of Tezcatlipoca, Alvarado ordered his men to attack the unarmed celebrants in the temple courtyard. Hundreds were killed, nobles and commoners alike, in what was essentially a massacre. The city erupted. Whatever fragile peace Moctezuma had maintained shattered instantly. The Aztecs attacked the Spanish compound, besieging it, cutting off food and water, fighting desperately to destroy these invaders who had violated the most sacred ceremony in their calendar. Moctezuma tried to calm the situation, appearing before his people, asking them to stop fighting, promising that the Spanish would leave if peace was restored. His people rejected him. They threw stones at their own emperor. They shouted that he was a coward, a traitor, a failure. He had lost their faith completely. According to Spanish accounts, Moctezuma was struck by stones thrown by his own subjects during this confrontation. According to Aztec accounts, the Spanish killed him when he was no longer useful as a hostage. The truth is murky, lost in conflicting narratives and motivations to assign blame. What's clear is that Moctezuma died in June or July of 1520, either from wounds inflicted by his own people or murdered by the Spanish. He was approximately 40 years old. He had been emperor for 17 years. He had presided over the effective end of Aztec independence, though the final military collapse would take another year to complete. Here's the tragedy of Moctezuma. He was a capable ruler facing an impossible situation. He was trying to manage a crisis that transcended normal political or military challenges. He was operating within a worldview where the supernatural was real, where prophecy mattered, where ritual determined cosmic outcomes. And he was confronted with invaders who didn't share that worldview, who couldn't even understand it, who dismissed his deepest religious beliefs as demon worship, and demanded he abandon the practices that he believed kept the universe functioning. Could anyone have succeeded in his position? Probably not. Some historians argue that immediate military action against the Spanish when they first arrived might have changed outcomes. Perhaps. But Moctezuma didn't have the luxury of hindsight. He was making decisions based on the information available, the worldview he inhabited, and the cosmic responsibilities he carried. He tried to maintain balance, tried to fulfill his religious obligations, while also managing unprecedented political realities. He failed, but the failure was perhaps inevitable, given the impossible nature of his situation. After his death, the Aztec Empire continued to resist for another year. His successors, less burdened by religious hesitation, fought the Spanish with ferocious determination. But disease, brought by the Europeans and utterly devastating to indigenous populations with no immunity, killed far more Aztecs than Spanish weapons ever did. Tenochtitlan fell in August 1521, after a months-long siege that left the city in ruins and tens of thousands dead from violence, starvation, and disease. The cosmic order Moctezuma had dedicated his life to maintaining collapsed not because he failed in his rituals, but because the universe didn't actually work the way he thought it did. The sun didn't need blood to rise. The gods weren't going to destroy the world if sacrifices stopped. The fifth sun wasn't ending in the way Aztec prophecy predicted. Instead, a different kind of catastrophe occurred: conquest, colonization, cultural annihilation, and the imposition of an entirely foreign worldview. Moctezuma spent his final months watching everything he believed in proven false. The Spanish didn't die from magic. The gods didn't intervene to save their people. The universe didn't collapse when sacrifices were interrupted. Instead, his city was besieged, his people were dying, and the elaborate cosmic order he'd maintained so carefully was revealed as impotent against men with horses, guns, and European diseases. There's something deeply tragic about a man dying while the worldview that gave his life meaning disintegrates around him. Moctezuma wasn't stupid or weak. He was intelligent, capable, and burdened with responsibilities that would have crushed most people. He performed his duties faithfully, maintained cosmic order meticulously, and tried to navigate an impossible crisis with the tools and understanding available to him. That it all proved insufficient isn't a moral failure. It's just tragedy, the kind that happens when entire civilizations collide, and one proves more technologically advanced, despite not being more morally justified. As you lie in your comfortable bed now, safe from cosmic obligations and divine demands, consider what it might be like to carry Moctezuma's burden, to wake every morning knowing that if you failed in your duties, the universe might end, to perform painful bloodletting rituals daily because the sun needs your blood to rise, to make political and military decisions based not just on pragmatic concerns, but on prophecy and omen, to face an existential crisis while trying to maintain ritual obligations that seem increasingly inadequate. Moctezuma was human, which meant he was flawed, but he was also remarkable. He ruled an empire, maintained complex rituals, navigated impossible political situations, and tried his best to fulfill responsibilities that no modern leader could even imagine carrying. That he failed doesn't diminish the weight he bore. It just makes him, ultimately, a tragic figure caught between worlds, trying to maintain a cosmos that was already slipping away. We'll leave him there, in whatever afterlife he might have found, perhaps in Tlalocan if he drowned in his own people's contempt, or perhaps in Mictlan if he died in the Spanish compound, beginning the long 4-year journey through the underworld's 9 levels. The Aztecs believed in multiple afterlives, each determined by how you died rather than how you lived. Moctezuma's final destination, like so much else about his final days, remains uncertain. But the calendars he consulted so carefully, the ritual cycles he maintained so faithfully, the complex system of timekeeping that governed every aspect of Aztec life, those remain, carved in stone, recorded in codices, still puzzling historians today. And that's where we'll turn next, to the mysterious intricacy of Aztec sacred calendars, those wheels within wheels of time that structured an entire civilization's understanding of reality. But first, let your mind rest a moment. Moctezuma's story is heavy. The weight he carried was immense. You carry nothing comparable, which is a gift you might not have fully appreciated until now. Time, for the Aztecs, was not a straight line stretching from past to future. It was not something that simply flowed forward, carrying everyone along in its current. No, time was circular, cyclical, interlocking wheels of different sizes all spinning simultaneously, creating patterns that repeated, but never quite the same way twice. Understanding Aztec time requires abandoning almost everything you assume about how calendars work, which makes it perfect material for drifting off to sleep while contemplating something genuinely alien to modern thinking. Let's start with the basics, though even the basics are delightfully complicated. The Aztecs used 2 primary calendars simultaneously, and these calendars served completely different purposes. The first was the Xiuhpohualli, the solar calendar of 365 days, which tracked agricultural seasons and civic life. The second was the Tonalpohualli, the sacred calendar of 260 days, which governed ritual, divination, and the spiritual qualities of time itself. These 2 calendars ran concurrently, meshing like gears, and the combination of dates from both systems created unique identifiers that only repeated every 52 years. The Xiuhpohualli, the solar calendar, was divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 extra days at the end called the Nemontami, the empty days, the unlucky days, the days when the cosmic order was weakest and disaster lurked everywhere. These 5 days were profoundly disturbing to the Aztecs. They fasted during them, avoided important activities, tried to simply survive until the calendar rolled over into the next year. Children born during the Nemontami were considered cursed, doomed to unhappy lives. People whispered that during these days the boundaries between the human world and other realms became dangerously thin. Each of the 18 months had a name and was associated with specific ceremonies, specific deities, specific obligations. The first month, Atlcahualo, involved ceremonies for rain gods and the sacrifice of children on mountaintops, their tears seen as sympathetic magic to bring rain. The second month, Tlacaxipehualistli, was that flaying ceremony we discussed earlier, where priests wore the skins of sacrificial victims to represent agricultural renewal. And so on, through the year, each month bringing its own rituals, its own divine focus, its own demands on the population. But the Xiuhpohualli was the simple calendar, the one anyone could understand with a bit of effort. The Tonalpohualli was where things became truly mysterious, where the Aztec understanding of time revealed itself as something profoundly different from our own linear conception. The Tonalpohualli consisted of 260 days created by combining 20-day signs with 13 numbers. Each day had a name like crocodile, wind, house, lizard, serpent, death, deer, rabbit, water, dog, monkey, grass, reed, jaguar, eagle, vulture, motion, flint, rain, or flower. And each day had a number from 1 to 13. So you might have 1 crocodile, 2 wind, 3 house, and so on, cycling through all 260 possible combinations before the pattern repeated. But here's where it gets interesting. Each day in the Tono Pohwali had a spiritual quality, a character, an inherent nature that influenced everything that happened on that day and determined the fate of anyone born on it. Some days were fortunate, others disastrous. Most were mixed or neutral. The Aztecs consulted professional diviners, called tonopuke, who specialized in reading the calendar and determining the implications of any given day. Let's say you were born on 7 Rain. The diviner would consult the Tonalamato, the Book of Days, examining the complex web of associations surrounding that date. The number 7 had certain qualities, neither particularly good nor bad, somewhat neutral, but leaning toward instability. The day sign Rain was associated with Tlaloc, the rain god, which suggested a connection to water, to fertility, to the life-giving but also dangerous power of storms. The diviner would also consider which tritena, which 13-day week, contained your birth date, because each tritena was governed by a particular deity and had its own overall character. The diviner might tell your parents that you were destined to be prosperous but moody, generous but unpredictable, blessed with the capacity to bring abundance, but also capable of causing disruption. Your parents would then know how to raise you, what to encourage, what to watch for. And throughout your life, you would identify with your birth date, understanding yourself through its characteristics. It was astrology, but far more systematic and embedded in daily life than Western zodiac signs ever were. But it wasn't just birth dates that mattered. Every day had implications for every activity. Some days were good for warfare, others for planting, others for marriage, others for doing absolutely nothing important because the cosmic forces were misaligned and any significant undertaking would end badly. The Tonal Pohwali governed when ceremonies were performed, when battles were initiated, when important political decisions were made. Ignoring the calendar's advice was considered foolish at best and sacrilegious at worst. Now, here's where the mathematics becomes genuinely fascinating. The Pohwali of 365 days and the Tonal Pohwali of 260 days meshed together, creating what's called the calendar round. Any given date could be expressed in both systems. For example, 2 reed in the Tonal Pohwali and the 12th day of the month talks cattle in the Pohwali. This specific combination would only occur once every 52 years. 52 years was therefore a complete cycle, a cosmic age in miniature. When the calendar round completed and began again, the Aztecs held the new fire ceremony, the most important ritual in their entire religious calendar. All fires throughout the empire were extinguished. People destroyed household goods, fasted, and waited in darkness and anxiety. At midnight, priests climbed to the top of the hill of the star, performed a sacrifice, and kindled a new fire in the chest cavity of the victim. If the fire caught successfully, messengers would carry torches lit from this sacred flame to every corner of the empire, and everyone would relight their fires from it, beginning the new cycle with renewed hope that the universe would continue for another 52 years. If the fire didn't catch, if the ceremony failed, the universe would end. The sun would not rise. Darkness would consume everything. This was the belief deeply held, genuinely terrifying. Every 52 years, the Aztecs faced what they considered a real possibility of cosmic annihilation, averted only through perfect ritual performance and divine mercy. But wait, there's more. because of course there is. The Aztecs also tracked longer cycles, particularly the Venus cycle. Venus was identified with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, and its movements were considered profoundly significant. Venus has a synodic period of 584 days, and the Aztecs observed this carefully, noting when Venus appeared as the morning star, disappeared, reappeared as the evening star, disappeared again. These transitions were dangerous times, when Quetzalcoatl's power was strongest and his influence most unpredictable. The Aztecs calculated that 5 Venus cycles of 584 days each equaled 2,920 days, which is exactly 8 solar years of 365 days. This beautiful mathematical harmony wasn't a coincidence. It revealed the underlying order of the cosmos. The Aztecs were excellent astronomers, making observations over centuries, recording their findings in codices, developing predictive models that could forecast eclipses and planetary conjunctions with impressive accuracy. They also tracked longer cycles still, periods of hundreds or thousands of years. The concept of the 5 suns, the 5 great ages of creation, provided a deep temporal framework. Each sun was associated with a specific element and ended in catastrophe. The first sun ended when jaguars devoured humanity. The second sun was destroyed by hurricanes. The third sun fell to volcanic fire. The fourth sun drowned in floods. The current 5th sun, the sun of motion, was destined to end in earthquakes. When would this happen? The Aztecs didn't claim to know precisely, but they believed the end was inevitable. All they could do was delay it through proper ritual observance. Every day that the sun rose was a victory, a temporary reprieve from the cosmic catastrophe that would eventually consume everything. This created a profound temporal anxiety, a sense that time itself was dangerous, that every moment existed on borrowed time, purchased with blood and prayer. Let's talk about how this played out in practical terms. Imagine you're planning to undertake something important, perhaps getting married, or starting a business venture, or building a house. You would consult a tonalpuqui, a calendar priest, who would examine the tonalpohualli to find an auspicious date. But it wasn't just a matter of finding one good day. The diviner would consider the day sign, the number, the trishena, the month in the Xiuhpohualli, the position of Venus, any recent omens, the birth dates of the people involved, and dozens of other factors. The diviner might determine that no suitable date existed in the near future. Perhaps the next favorable period was 3 months away. You would wait. You had no choice. Proceeding on an unlucky day would doom the enterprise, anger the gods, potentially bring catastrophe not just on yourself, but on your family and community. The calendar wasn't a suggestion. It was law, cosmic law, more fundamental than any human legislation. This created a society where timing was everything and patience was mandatory. You couldn't just do things when you felt like it. You had to wait for the calendar to permit it. This would drive modern people insane, accustomed as we are to instant gratification and self-determined schedules. But for the Aztecs, it was simply how reality worked. Time had texture, quality, spiritual dimension. Some moments were propitious, others disastrous, and you ignored this at your peril. The calendar also created employment for specialists. The tonalpuk were highly trained professionals who spent years memorizing the tonalamato, learning the associations and meanings of each day, developing the interpretive skills necessary to provide useful guidance. They were part priest, part counselor, part fortune-teller, and absolutely essential to daily life. No one made important decisions without consulting them. Children were often named according to their birth date. If you were born on 7-flower, you might simply be named 7-flower, or given a name that incorporated those elements. This tied your identity permanently to the calendar, to your place in the cosmic order. You weren't just an individual with arbitrary characteristics. You were a manifestation of specific temporal qualities, born at a moment that defined your nature. Here's something that still puzzles historians. Why 260 days for the Tonalpohualli? Why that specific number? Several theories exist, none entirely satisfactory. One theory suggests it's the human gestation period, approximately 9 months, making it a calendar of life cycles. Another theory points out that 260 days is the interval between the sun's zenith passages at the latitude of central Mexico, creating an agricultural significance. A third theory suggests it might relate to Venus cycles, or some other astronomical phenomenon we've not yet identified. The truth is, we don't fully know. The Aztecs didn't explain their reasoning in any surviving documents. The Tonalpohualli was ancient by their time, inherited from earlier Mesoamerican cultures like the Olmecs and Maya, refined over thousands of years. It was simply the sacred calendar, the true calendar, the one that revealed the spiritual nature of time. Why it had 260 days was perhaps as obvious to them as why a week has 7 days is to us, which is to say, traditional rather than logically derivable. The Maya, who shared similar calendar systems with the Aztecs, added another layer of complexity with their long count, a linear count of days since a mythical creation date. The Aztecs may have had something similar, though the evidence is less clear. What's certain is that they thought about time with a sophistication that rivaled any civilization on Earth, developing mathematical and astronomical knowledge that was in some ways superior to European science of the same period. Consider the precision required to track Venus cycles over centuries, to notice that 5 Venus periods equal 8 solar years, to calculate eclipse predictions, to maintain multiple interlocking calendars without error. This required systematic observation, careful record-keeping, mathematical skill, and institutional continuity across generations. The Aztecs weren't primitive or superstitious in the sense of being irrational. They were rigorously systematic in their cosmology, building elaborate intellectual structures based on careful observation of natural cycles. But they interpreted those observations through a framework where time had spiritual qualities, where numbers had mystical significance, where the cosmos was alive and conscious and potentially hostile. Modern science would look at Venus and see gravitational mechanics and orbital periods. The Aztecs looked at Venus and saw Quetzalcoatl, a god whose movements influenced human fate, whose positions in the sky created dangerous or favorable conditions for specific activities. Let's talk about the Nemontemi again, those 5 unlucky days at the end of the solar year. The Aztecs genuinely feared these days. They fasted, avoided quarrels, refused to make decisions, tried to be invisible to the gods and spirits who might be prowling the earth seeking victims. People stayed in their homes when possible. Fires were kept low. Children were warned to behave perfectly. The whole society held its breath, waiting for the year to turn over and normal time to resume. Why were these days so dangerous? Because they were outside the normal structure, leftover time, the remainder when 360 days of 18 months were subtracted from 365 days of a solar year. They didn't fit properly into the divine order. They were cosmic overflow, temporally unstable, vulnerable to chaos. anything could happen during the Nemontami. The boundaries between the human world and the spirit world were thin. Monstrous beings might cross over. The gods might notice you and decide to test you or punish you for no reason. This belief had real consequences. The suicide rate may have increased during the Nemontami, though evidence is fragmentary. People who were already ill often died during these days, perhaps because they gave up hope, or because medical treatment was suspended out of fear that any intervention would make things worse. Society essentially paused, waiting in anxious anticipation for the calendar to reset. When the new year arrived, on the first day of Atl-Kawalo, there was tremendous relief and celebration. The dangerous passage was complete. Normal time had resumed. The cosmos had survived another cycle. Ceremonies could proceed. Life could continue. The universe remained intact for now. Until the next Nemontami, 52 weeks away, lurking at the end of the year like an unavoidable cosmic trap. The interlocking nature of the calendars also created what we might call temporal nodes, moments when multiple significant factors aligned. Certain dates in the calendar round were especially powerful or dangerous. For example, the day one crocodile marked the beginning of the Tonalpohualli and was considered a day of creation and renewal, but also instability. When one crocodile coincided with important dates in the Xiuhpohualli, particularly at the start or end of the year, the resulting moment was charged with extraordinary cosmic significance. The Aztecs tracked these patterns meticulously, planning major ceremonies and events to align with favorable confluences. The rededication of the Templo Mayor under Ahuitzotl, Moctezuma II's predecessor, was timed to coincide with such a moment, multiplying the ritual's potency. Thousands were sacrificed over the course of 4 days to properly consecrate the expanded temple, and the timing was chosen to maximize the spiritual impact. But here's what makes all of this genuinely mysterious to modern historians. We can reconstruct the calendar mechanics fairly well, but we struggle to understand the lived experience of temporal consciousness that the calendars created. What was it like to experience time as having spiritual quality? To know that your birthday determined your fate? To plan your life around the rhythms of sacred cycles? To genuinely believe that the universe might end if rituals weren't performed at exactly the right moments in the calendar? We have the intellectual framework, but the phenomenology escapes us. It's like trying to understand color by reading descriptions of wavelengths. The technical information is there, but the experience, the qualia, the what-it's-likeness of Aztec temporal consciousness remains elusive. They lived in time differently than we do, and that difference is profound enough that fully grasping it requires an imaginative leap that may be impossible for modern minds fully embedded in linear, secular time. Consider that the Aztecs had no conception of time as an abstract medium in which events occur. Time wasn't empty or neutral. Every moment had character, personality almost. Some moments were angry, others peaceful, others fertile, others destructive. Time was as varied as landscape, and navigating it required skill, knowledge, and divine guidance. You couldn't just do things whenever convenient. You had to do them when time permitted, when the cosmic conditions were right. This created a different relationship with agency and control. Modern people believe they're in charge of their schedules, that they decide when to act. The Aztecs knew that time decided, that the gods decided, and human will had to accommodate itself to cosmic rhythms. This sounds fatalistic, but it wasn't quite that either. Proper ritual could influence outcomes. Divination could reveal favorable moments, human action mattered, but it mattered within constraints set by forces larger than individual choice. The calendars also created a shared temporal community. Everyone in the Aztec Empire, from Moctezuma in his palace to peasants in distant provinces, lived according to the same calendars, celebrated the same feast days, observed the same unlucky periods. This synchronized social life in ways that bound the empire together, despite its ethnic and linguistic diversity. The calendar was more unifying than language or law, creating a common temporal framework that made people feel part of a single cosmic community. When the Spanish arrived and tried to impose the Julian calendar, they weren't just changing timekeeping systems. They were attacking the fundamental structure of Aztec reality. The Catholic calendar had feast days and saints' days, sure, but time itself was neutral, secular, empty of spiritual quality. The Spanish couldn't understand why the Aztecs cared so desperately about their calendars, why giving up the Tonalpohualli felt like giving up their souls. To Spanish eyes, it was pagan superstition. To Aztec eyes, it was the dissolution of cosmic order. Many Aztecs continued to use their traditional calendars in secret for generations after the conquest, hiding the knowledge from Spanish authorities, teaching it to their children in whispers. Some communities in Mexico maintained fragments of the old calendar system into the 20th century, though much knowledge was lost. The Spanish burned codices, killed priests who knew the calendar secrets, punished anyone caught performing traditional rituals. The systematic destruction of Aztec temporal knowledge was one of the great intellectual catastrophes of history. What survives are fragments. The Aztec calendar stone, often called the sunstone, that massive carved disc showing the 5 suns and calendar symbols, weighing over 24 tons, and discovered in the late 18th century in Mexico City. We have a few codices that escaped destruction, like the Codex Borbonicus, which includes a complete Tonalpohualli with illustrations of the day signs and their associated deities. We have Spanish chronicles written by priests and conquistadors who documented what they didn't understand and often what they actively despised. From these fragments, scholars have reconstructed much of the calendar system's mechanics. We can calculate dates, determine what day in the Aztec calendar corresponds to what date in our system. We can map the ceremonies and understand their timing. But the deeper meanings, the subtle interpretations, the lived experience of temporal consciousness, these remain partially mysterious, requiring speculation and imaginative reconstruction. And perhaps that's appropriate. Perhaps some aspects of Aztec thought are genuinely lost, unable to be fully recovered because the cultural context that made them meaningful has vanished. We can admire the mathematical sophistication, marvel at the astronomical precision, puzzle over the theological complexity. But becoming an Aztec, thinking like an Aztec, experiencing time as they did, that may be forever beyond us, separated as we are by conquest, conversion, and half a millennium of European cultural dominance. Still, there's something haunting about the Aztec calendar systems, something that speaks to human drives toward pattern finding and meaning making. The Aztecs looked at the regular movements of celestial bodies and saw divine order. They noticed patterns in human experience and attributed them to temporal influences. They created elaborate structures to explain and predict, to bring order to chaos, to feel they had some measure of control over an overwhelming universe. Aren't we doing something similar with our scientific theories and mathematical models? We look at quantum mechanics and general relativity, at the Standard Model and dark matter, at evolutionary biology and neuroscience, creating elaborate intellectual structures to explain reality, to predict outcomes, to feel we understand the universe we inhabit. We mock Aztec beliefs as superstition, while forgetting that all human cultures, including our own, are engaged in the same fundamental project: making sense of existence, creating meaning from chaos, building systems that let us navigate reality with some degree of confidence. The difference is that our models work better technologically, produce more accurate predictions, lead to more effective interventions in the physical world. But the drive, the need, the hunger for understanding and control, that's universal, that's human, that connects us across time and culture, to the Aztec calendar priests calculating Venus cycles in their mountaintop observatories, to Moctezuma performing bloodletting at dawn to ensure the sun rises, to ordinary people consulting diviners before making important life decisions. As you lie there now, comfortable and relaxed, think about your own relationship with time. You probably have a calendar on your phone or wall marking appointments and deadlines. You probably have some sense of time pressure, of schedules to keep, of temporal obligations. But the quality of your temporal experience is profoundly different from that of an Aztec. Time for you is neutral, secular, measured in regular units, flowing forward predictably. It has no spiritual dimension, no inherent character beyond what you project onto it. Is that better? In some ways, obviously, yes. You're not terrorized by unlucky days. You don't fear cosmic collapse every 52 years. You can make plans without consulting calendar priests. But have we also lost something? A sense of time as meaningful, as varied, as textured? A feeling of being embedded in cosmic rhythms larger than ourselves? A temporal consciousness that connected daily life to eternal patterns? Perhaps. Or perhaps the Aztec way of experiencing time was a beautiful mistake, an elaborate structure built on false premises that nonetheless provided meaning and community for millions of people across centuries. Perhaps our secular, linear time is more accurate, even if less enchanting. Or perhaps accuracy and enchantment are orthogonal concerns, and we've traded one for the other without fully appreciating what we've gained and lost in the exchange. The Aztec calendars are gone, except as archaeological curiosities and historical objects of study. The temporal consciousness they created is gone too, except in fragments and imaginative reconstructions. Time has moved on, which is ironic given that the Aztecs believed time moved in circles. Perhaps they were right in a different sense than they intended. Civilizations rise and fall, empires come and go, calendar systems replace each other, and the cycles continue. Not the same cycles they imagined, but cycles nonetheless. In the next segment, we'll look at the priests and nobles who maintained these calendars, who performed the rituals, who lived surrounded by cosmic obligation and earthly privilege. But for now, let the complexity of Aztec time wash over you like a gentle wave. Don't try to understand it completely. That's impossible from our temporal position. Just appreciate its strangeness, its sophistication, its utter difference from your own experience. History is full of ways of being human that we can barely imagine, and that's what makes it endlessly, drowsily fascinating. The wheels of the calendar have stopped turning for the Aztecs. For you, time continues its familiar forward flow, carrying you gently toward sleep, toward morning, toward whatever comes next. No cosmic obligation awaits you. No unlucky days threaten you. The sun will rise tomorrow without requiring your blood. That's a gift the Aztecs would have envied, if they could imagine it at all. Segment 4. Life of Aztec priests and nobles. Let's climb the social pyramid now, ascending from the common believers we met in the first segment, past the troubled emperor of the second, beyond the abstract calendar systems of the third, to the religious elite who actually performed the rituals, maintained the cosmic order, and lived lives of extraordinary privilege, purchased with equally extraordinary obligations. The priests and nobles of Tenochtitlan inhabited a world simultaneously elevated and imprisoned, sacred and deeply strange. Picture the Templo Mayor at dawn. The great twin pyramid rises from the ceremonial center, its steps steep and deliberately exhausting, painted in brilliant colors we can only imagine from faded archaeological traces. At the top, two temples sit side by side, one dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god and war god painted blue, the other to Tlaloc, the rain god, painted red and white. Between them stands a young priest, perhaps 20 years old, who has been awake all night in preparation for this moment. His appearance would shock you. His hair is long, matted, never washed, encrusted with dried blood from years of self-sacrifice. It hangs down his back in thick ropes, black as obsidian, heavy with the residue of ritual. His earlobes are shredded from countless piercings, scarred and deformed by years of daily bloodletting. His body is painted black with soot and sacred pigments. He wears only a simple loincloth despite the morning chill. He smells of copal incense, smoke, old blood, and something else. A particular scent that marked priests as separate from ordinary humanity. He hasn't bathed in months. Aztec priests were forbidden from washing except during specific purification ceremonies. This wasn't laziness or ignorance of hygiene. It was deliberate. The accumulated blood, the matted hair, the body paint, the distinctive smell, all of this marked them as living in a liminal state between the human and divine worlds. They were supposed to be uncomfortable, supposed to be visibly different, supposed to sacrifice normal human comforts in their service to the gods. This young priest began training around age 7 or 8, sent to the Kalmakak, the elite school attached to temples, where future priests and nobles were educated. His childhood ended the day he entered. The Kalmakak was brutal by design, intended to produce young men capable of enduring extreme physical and psychological hardship. Students woke before dawn for cold baths and bloodletting. They fasted frequently. They performed exhausting physical labor maintaining the temple complex. They memorized vast amounts of religious knowledge, prayers, hymns, calendar calculations, ritual procedures, divine genealogies. The discipline was severe. Minor infractions earned beatings. Serious failures earned expulsion, which was considered a profound humiliation. Students learned that their individual comfort was irrelevant, that their purpose was service to the gods and the cosmic order. They learned to endure pain without complaint, to fast until dizzy with hunger, to stay awake through night-long vigils, to perform bloodletting with steady hands even when exhausted. But they also learned sophisticated knowledge. The Kalmakak taught astronomy, mathematics, history, poetry, music, painting, and sculpture. Aztec priests were intellectuals, trained in what we might call scientific observation within their cosmological framework. They tracked celestial movements, calculated calendar correlations, maintained historical records, composed hymns of genuine literary merit. The education was comprehensive and rigorous, producing learned men capable of complex, abstract thought. Our young priest, standing atop the Templo Mayor at dawn, is the product of perhaps 12 or 15 years of this education. He has spent more than half his life in service to the gods. He has performed bloodletting thousands of times. He has participated in hundreds of ceremonies. He has memorized the prayers to dozens of deities. He knows the calendar systems intimately. He can read the codices, those folded bark paper books painted with pictographic writing. He is, in modern terms, highly educated and profoundly specialized. This morning, he will assist senior priests in the dawn sacrifice. This happens every morning, without exception. As the sun approaches the horizon, a captive warrior is brought up the steep temple steps. The captive has been prepared for this moment, possibly for months. He has been treated well, fed properly, sometimes even allowed certain pleasures. He knows what's coming. He accepts it, or at least he doesn't resist effectively because resistance is impossible and also cosmically inappropriate. 4 priests hold the captive down on the sacrificial stone, a slightly convex block that arches the victim's chest upward. A senior priest, the Tlana Makak, raises an obsidian blade. The blade is sharp beyond modern steel's capability, capable of cutting with molecular precision. In one swift motion, the priest cuts through the sternum, reaches into the chest cavity, and extracts the still-beating heart. Our young priest's role is to catch the blood in a bowl, ensuring none is wasted. The blood is sacred, powerful beyond measure, necessary for the sun's daily resurrection. After the heart is offered to Huitzilopochtli, held up to the rising sun, our young priest will take some of the blood to anoint the lips of divine statues throughout the temple complex. The gods must be fed. This is not metaphor. This is breakfast. The body is then rolled down the temple steps, tumbling end over end, leaving a trail of blood on the steep staircase. At the bottom, other priests dismember it. Choice parts may be consumed ritually by nobles and warriors. The skull is added to the tzompantli, the skull rack, where thousands of previous victims are displayed. The ritual is efficient, practiced, unglamorous despite its cosmic importance. This happens every morning. Every single morning, year after year, decade after decade, century after century. Think about the psychological impact of performing this ritual thousands of times over a career spanning decades. Does it become routine? Does it remain profound? Both, probably. The priests knew they were maintaining the universe. That never stopped being important. But the physical actions must have become automatic, muscle memory, like any frequently repeated task. After the dawn sacrifice, the day's work continues. The temple complex is vast, requiring constant maintenance. There are fires to tend, the sacred fires that must never be allowed to extinguish. There are floors to sweep, incense to burn, statues to clean and anoint, offerings to arrange. The administrative work of religion is substantial. Records must be kept of sacrifices performed, offerings received, ceremonial calendar obligations fulfilled. Junior priests do the grunt work. Senior priests handle the specialized ritual tasks and administrative oversight. At the top of the priestly hierarchy sits the Quetzalcoatl Totec Tlamakasqui, the high priest of Quetzalcoatl, and the Quetzalcoatl Tlaloc Tlamakasqui, the high priest of Tlaloc. These 2 men were among the most powerful figures in the empire, second only to the emperor himself, and sometimes effectively equal to him in influence. The high priests were chosen from noble families after demonstrating exceptional ritual knowledge and administrative capability. They advised the emperor on religious matters, which meant they advised on everything, since religion permeated all aspects of life. They determined when ceremonies should be performed, interpreted omens, consulted the calendars, and made decisions that affected millions of lives. When Moctezuma consulted his religious advisors about the Spanish arrival, he was consulting these men, whose judgment shaped his catastrophic responses. But let's not stay at the top of the hierarchy. Let's follow a mid-ranking priest through a typical day during a festival period. It's the month of Panquetzalistli, sacred to Huitzilopochtli, the most important ceremony of the year for the Aztecs. The preparations have been ongoing for months. Hundreds of captives have been gathered from recent military campaigns. Enormous quantities of offerings have been assembled. Thousands of quail, flowers by the ton, copal incense measured in cartloads, elaborate costumes and regalia created by specialized artisans. Our priest has been fasting for 4 days, consuming only minimal water and no food at all. He is lightheaded, dizzy, exhausted. This is intentional. Fasting creates an altered state of consciousness that the Aztecs believed opened channels to the divine realm. Combined with sleep deprivation and the rhythmic drumming and chanting that accompanied ceremonies, the priests achieved trance states that they interpreted as direct communication with the gods. The ceremony itself lasts multiple days. There are processions around the ceremonial center, each following prescribed routes, each with specific participants wearing specific costumes. There are dances, some lasting hours, performed in intricate patterns that reenact mythological events. There are hymns sung in sacred languages that even the singers may not fully understand, preserved from earlier eras, maintained through oral tradition and codex notation. And there are sacrifices. Many, many sacrifices. During major festivals like Panquetzalistli, the number of victims could reach into the hundreds, possibly thousands. The priests worked in teams, rotating to prevent exhaustion. The process had to be maintained continuously from dawn to dusk. Remove heart, offer to sun. Next victim, remove heart, offer to sun. Next victim, for hours. The physical stamina required was immense. Our mid-ranking priest performs perhaps 20 or 30 sacrifices during this festival. His arms ache from reaching into chest cavities. His hands are slippery with blood. His lungs burn from copal smoke inhalation. He is beyond tired, beyond hungry, operating in a strange state where physical sensation seems distant, and the boundary between himself and the ritual has dissolved. This is what the training prepared him for, the ability to continue functioning when normal human limits would force cessation. After the festival concludes, there is a brief rest period. The priests are allowed to bathe, to eat normally, to sleep. But even rest periods include ritual obligations. Personal bloodletting continues daily. Prayers must be offered. The fires must be tended. There is no true break from cosmic maintenance. Now let's shift perspective to the nobles, the Pipiltin, who occupied a social stratum adjacent to but distinct from the priesthood. Not all nobles were priests, though many received priestly training in the Kalmakak before deciding whether to pursue religious careers or secular ones. The nobility was hereditary but also merit-based to some degree. Noble families could lose status through incompetence or cowardice. Commoners could achieve noble status through exceptional military service, though this was rare. Noble life was comfortable by Aztec standards, which still means harsh by ours. A typical noble family lived in a compound with multiple rooms, better than the single-room homes of commoners but not palatial. They had servants, sometimes slaves captured in war or purchased. They ate better than commoners. More meat, more variety, access to luxury foods like cacao, which was consumed as a bitter drink, sometimes flavored with chili and other spices. But noble status came with overwhelming obligations. Nobles were expected to be generous, hosting feasts for commoners on feast days, providing for dependents and clients, donating to temple maintenance. A stingy noble lost respect rapidly. Nobles were expected to be brave in warfare, leading from the front, capturing enemies for sacrifice. A cowardly noble was mocked mercilessly and could lose status. Nobles were expected to speak eloquently, to demonstrate refined manners, to embody cultural ideals in their behavior. Noble children, like priestly candidates, attended the Comicac. The education was similarly rigorous, similarly brutal. They learned warfare, oratory, history, poetry, music, painting, and sufficient religious knowledge to participate appropriately in ceremonies. They learned the complex etiquette that governed noble interactions. They learned that their status was both privilege and burden, that noblesse oblige meant genuine sacrifice. Let's follow a noble woman through her day, because women's experiences are often neglected in discussions of Aztec society. Her name is Miahuaxochitl, which means maize tassel flower. She is perhaps 30 years old, married to a mid-ranking noble who serves as a military officer. She has 3 children, 2 of whom survived infancy, a typical ratio for the period. Her life is constrained by gender expectations, but also marked by real power within her sphere. She wakes before dawn, as everyone does. Her first task is overseeing the household's morning bloodletting. She performs her own, piercing her earlobes and catching the blood on bark paper, which she burns in the household shrine. She ensures her children and servants do the same. This is her responsibility as head of the household's religious life. If anyone fails in their obligations, it reflects on her. She then supervises the preparation of breakfast. The main staple is maize, prepared in dozens of ways: tortillas, tamales, atole, a warm maize drink, various gruels and porridges. Her family also has access to beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, and occasionally meat or fish. Preparation takes hours. Grinding maize on the metate, the stone grinding slab, is exhausting work typically performed by women. Miahuaxochitl doesn't do this herself. She has servants, but she oversees the process, ensuring quality and proper offerings to household gods. After breakfast, she works on weaving. Noble women were expected to be expert weavers, producing the fine cotton cloth that served as currency and tribute. Weaving was not just economically important, it was spiritually significant. The goddess Tlazolteotl was associated with weaving, and the act of creating cloth paralleled divine creation. Miahuaxochitl has been weaving since childhood. Her fingers move automatically, the backstrap loom secured to her waist, the threads interlacing in complex patterns she can execute without conscious thought. She is creating a huipil, an elaborately decorated blouse, as a gift for a higher-ranking noble woman. This gift is part of the complex web of social obligation that governs noble life. The recipient gave Miahuaxochitl's family gifts during a previous ceremony. This reciprocal gifting maintains alliances, demonstrates respect, and ensures continued social cohesion. Failing to reciprocate appropriately would be a serious breach of etiquette. While weaving, Miahuaxochitl listens to her daughter recite lessons learned at school. Elite girls attended a separate school, the Ichpochkali, where they learned weaving, cooking, religious observances, and appropriate female behavior. The education was less comprehensive than boys' Kalmakak training, but still substantial. Her daughter is memorizing prayers to Tlazolteotl and Chicomecoatl, the maize goddess. Miahuaxochitl corrects her pronunciation, ensures she understands the meanings, prepares her for the religious obligations of adult life. In the afternoon, Miahuaxochitl visits a market. She is accompanied by servants who will carry purchases, because noble women do not carry burdens in public. That would be beneath their status. The market is a spectacular display of goods from across the empire. Cacao from the hot lowlands, jade from distant mountains, featherwork from specialized artisans, obsidian blades from volcanic regions, pottery of astonishing variety, live animals, medicinal herbs, prepared foods. The market operates without money in the modern sense. Cacao beans serve as small change, cotton cloth as larger denominations. But much exchange occurs through barter, negotiation, evaluation of relative worth. Miahuaxochitl is skilled at this, able to assess quality rapidly, negotiate firmly but politely, maintain the dignity appropriate to her status, while also ensuring good value. She purchases copal incense for the household shrine, some high-quality chili peppers, a small amount of raw cacao, and feathers for decorating her son's costume for an upcoming ceremony. The featherwork dealer recognizes her family name and offers a slight discount, not because he's generous, but because maintaining good relationships with noble families ensures continued patronage. Miahuaxochitl accepts graciously, knowing this exchange binds both parties in ongoing mutual obligation. On her way home, she passes a funeral procession. A noble warrior has died in battle, which means he is assured a place in the paradise of the sun, accompanying Huitzilopochtli across the sky each day for 4 years before being reincarnated as a hummingbird. The procession is celebratory despite the grief. Musicians play, mourners sing. The warrior's body will be cremated with full honors, his ashes buried with ceremonial objects that demonstrate his status and achievements. Miahuaxochitl pauses, touches the ground, touches her fingers to her lips in respect. She didn't know the warrior personally, but the death of any noble diminishes the community. She offers a brief prayer that his journey to paradise is swift, that his family finds comfort, that his death in service to the gods is appropriately honored. Back home, she prepares for the evening. Her husband is hosting a small gathering of fellow military officers to discuss an upcoming campaign. Miahuaxochitl oversees the preparation of food and pulque, the fermented maguey drink that was the primary alcohol in Aztec society. Pulque was sacred, associated with various deities, consumed ceremonially but also recreationally. Public drunkenness was severely punished, but controlled drinking in appropriate contexts was acceptable, even mandatory during certain ceremonies. The gathering includes conversation about the campaign's logistics, but also poetry recitation, musical performance, and philosophical discussion. Aztec nobles were expected to be cultured, to appreciate and create art, to engage in refined discourse. The conversation is formal, elaborate, full of metaphors and indirect references. Direct, blunt speech is considered rude, appropriate only for emergencies or addressing inferiors. Miahuaxochitl participates from the margins, serving food and drink, occasionally joining the conversation when invited. Her opinion on domestic matters is respected, even sought. Her husband consults her about household finances, about their children's education, about social obligations to other families. Within her sphere, she wields real authority. As night falls and the gathering concludes, Miahuaxochitl performs evening prayers at the household shrine. She burns more copal, offers food to the household gods, thanks the day for passing without disaster. She checks on her children, ensures they've done their evening bloodletting, reminds her oldest son about his upcoming obligations at a temple ceremony where he will participate as part of his education. Before sleep, she reflects on the day. She has fulfilled her obligations. Religious observances performed correctly, household managed efficiently, social relationships maintained through appropriate gift-giving and hospitality, children educated properly. Tomorrow will bring similar obligations, similar rhythms. Her life is comfortable but constrained, powerful within limits, privileged but never free from cosmic responsibility. Let's return briefly to the priests and consider their more extreme practices. Some priests specialized in particular deities and engaged in extreme asceticism specific to their god's requirements. Priests of Tlaloc, the rain god, sometimes dwelt in caves, fasted for months, and performed elaborate bloodletting rituals involving their genitals. Priests of Totec wore the flayed skins of sacrificial victims during the 20-day ceremony we've discussed. Priests of Tezcatlipoca engaged in practices so severe they often died young, burned out by the physical and psychological demands. The most extreme were the fire priests, who tended the eternal flames at the top of the Templo Mayor and other major temples. These fires had to burn continuously, without interruption, or cosmic disaster would follow. The fire priests worked in shifts, but their lives were consumed by this obligation. They slept in the temple, rarely left the complex, sacrificed normal human relationships and comforts to maintain their sacred charge. Some priests became what we might call mystics or visionaries. Through extended fasting, bloodletting, sleep deprivation, and possibly consumption of hallucinogenic substances like peyote or sacred mushrooms. They achieved states of consciousness where they claimed direct communication with divine beings. These visions were taken seriously, recorded, analyzed for prophetic content, consulted by rulers making important decisions. The distinction between genuine religious experience and practices that we'd now recognize as producing predictable neurological effects through deprivation and drugs is irrelevant from the Aztec perspective. The visions were real, whether produced by gods or brain chemistry. They provided information, guidance, connection to forces beyond human understanding. The priests who achieved them were honored, feared, and relied upon. But the psychological cost must have been enormous. Living in constant ritual intensity, performing bloodletting until your body is a map of scars, participating in sacrifices that number in the thousands over a career, maintaining extreme ascetic practices that damage health. This produces a state of being we can barely imagine. Some priests probably found profound meaning in their service, achieved a sense of cosmic purpose that sustained them through hardship. Others may have been broken by it, persisting through sheer willpower and social expectation. There's some evidence, fragmentary and disputed, that mental illness among priests was handled with surprising sophistication. Priests who became mentally unstable were sometimes relieved of their duties and given less demanding roles, essentially medical retirement. Others were treated with herbal medicines and ritual purification. The Aztecs recognized that the demands they placed on priests could break even strong individuals, and they had mechanisms, however crude, to manage this. The priestly and noble classes were intertwined, but distinct. Many nobles received priestly training without becoming full-time priests. Many priests came from noble families but abandoned noble privileges to pursue religious vocations. The emperor himself had priestly training and performed certain rituals that only he could conduct. The boundaries were permeable, creating a religious political elite that controlled both sacred and secular power. This elite maintained the entire system. They performed the rituals that kept the cosmos functioning. They interpreted the calendars that governed daily life. They educated the next generation. They preserved historical records and astronomical observations. They created the art and architecture that made Tenochtitlan magnificent. They managed the tribute system that enriched the empire. They led the military campaigns that expanded Aztec power. But they also trapped themselves in a system that allowed no escape. The cosmic maintenance required by their worldview was exhausting, literally endless, and utterly necessary from their perspective. They couldn't stop, couldn't reform, couldn't question fundamentally without risking the universe's collapse. So they continued, generation after generation, bleeding and fasting and sacrificing, maintaining an elaborate cosmic machine that they believed required constant fueling with human hearts. When the Spanish arrived and this entire system collapsed, the effect on the priestly class was catastrophic. Their purpose evaporated. The gods didn't save them. The rituals proved insufficient. Everything they dedicated their lives to maintaining simply ended. Many priests committed suicide. Others converted to Christianity, transferring their religious intensity to a new god. Some continued performing old rituals in secret, hiding from Spanish authorities, maintaining fragments of the old cosmic order even as it became obsolete. The nobles adapted somewhat better, at least initially. Some allied with the Spanish, married Spanish women, maintained positions in the colonial hierarchy. Their administrative skills were valuable to the new regime, but their children would be raised Catholic, would learn Spanish, would lose connection to the old ways. Within a few generations, the noble class as distinctly Aztec essentially ceased to exist. But in their moment, in their time, the priests and nobles of Tenochtitlan lived lives of extraordinary intensity and purpose. They bore cosmic responsibility that would crush modern people. They performed rituals we find horrifying, with genuine conviction that these rituals maintained existence itself. They were educated, sophisticated, capable of complex, abstract thought, and absolutely committed to a worldview that modern science reveals as fundamentally mistaken. That last part is important. They were wrong. The sun doesn't need blood to rise. The universe doesn't require human sacrifice to continue existing. The gods either don't exist or don't function as the Aztecs believed. All that suffering, all that blood, all that psychological torture, it was unnecessary, produced by a cosmology that mapped human experience, but not external reality. Yet they were also magnificent. They created a civilization of astonishing sophistication. They built cities, developed complex social systems, created art of profound beauty, composed poetry that still moves readers today, conducted astronomical observations of impressive precision, maintained order across a vast empire, despite lacking many technologies we consider essential. They did all of this while also maintaining a religious system so demanding it seems barely sustainable. As you lie in your comfortable bed now, in your world where priests don't exist in any comparable form, where sacrifice means giving up dessert or sleeping in on weekends, where cosmic maintenance is no one's responsibility, take a moment to appreciate the strange majesty of Aztec religious life. It was beautiful and terrible, sophisticated and brutal, meaningful and ultimately futile. The priests and nobles believed they were maintaining the universe. They were wrong, but their commitment was real, and their efforts shaped one of history's most fascinating civilizations. The temples are ruins now, overgrown or buried or converted into Catholic churches. The priests are long dead, their knowledge lost or transformed beyond recognition. The nobles vanished into the colonial population. their descendants often unaware of the extraordinary burden their ancestors carried. The gods received no more sacrifices. The calendars stopped turning. The cosmic machine stopped because it was never necessary in the first place. But for a few centuries in central Mexico, a civilization believed it was maintaining reality itself through blood and prayer. That belief shaped millions of lives, created extraordinary art and architecture, and produced a religious intensity that stands as one of the most extreme examples of human devotion to cosmic responsibility. It failed, as all civilizations eventually fail, but it failed spectacularly, and its strange beauty haunts us still across the centuries, captured in stone and codex and the fragmentary records of those who witnessed its final days. The sun rose this morning without sacrifice. It will rise tomorrow the same way. You can sleep peacefully, knowing no god requires your blood, no cosmic obligation awaits you at dawn. That's the gift of living in a disenchanted universe, freedom from divine demands, release from cosmic responsibility, the ability to exist without maintaining reality itself. The Aztecs would have envied you this freedom if they could imagine it. They couldn't, and so they bled and prayed and maintained their intricate system until history swept it away. Rest well. The gods, if they exist at all, don't need anything from you. The universe continues without your effort. Sleep, dream, wake to a world where your only obligations are human scale, manageable and entirely temporal. It's a good world, this one, even if it lacks the terrible majesty of the Aztec cosmos. And so, our journey through the Aztec religious world comes to its end, as all journeys must. We've walked with ordinary believers through their exhausting daily rituals, stood beside Moctezuma as his cosmic certainties crumbled, puzzled over calendar systems that measured time as living texture, and climbed temple steps with priests who maintained a universe through blood and prayer. It's been a strange journey, hasn't it? Disturbing and fascinating in equal measure. The Aztecs are gone now, truly gone in ways that few civilizations are. The Spanish conquest was so thorough, so systematic in its destruction of Aztec culture, that much of what we know comes from the conqueror's accounts, hardly unbiased sources. The temples were demolished, the codices burned, the priests killed or converted, the calendar systems suppressed, the very language transformed by Spanish influence. What remains are ruins, fragments, and the enormous weight of what was lost. But in those fragments, we glimpse something extraordinary. A civilization so committed to its cosmic vision that it organized every aspect of life around maintaining that vision. Modern people compartmentalize. We're religious or not, but either way, we spend most of our time in secular pursuits, work, entertainment, relationships, hobbies. The Aztecs knew no such division. Every moment was potentially sacred. Every action had cosmic implications. Every day brought obligations that connected individual lives to the universe's continued existence. Was this better than our way of living? Almost certainly not, at least not by our values. The human cost was staggering. Thousands sacrificed annually. Everyone engaged in painful bloodletting. The constant anxiety of omens and unlucky days. The psychological burden of cosmic responsibility. The Aztecs lived shorter, harder lives than we do, and their religious system contributed to that hardship. But was it meaningful? Undoubtedly. They lived in an enchanted universe where everything mattered, where human action had cosmic significance, where the sun's daily rising depended on their efforts. There's something simultaneously attractive and repulsive about that level of meaning, that complete integration of life and cosmos, We've gained so much by abandoning it: comfort, freedom, longer lives, scientific understanding, but we've also lost the sense of cosmic participation, the feeling of being essential to reality's continuation. The irony is profound. The Aztecs believed they were maintaining the universe, but the universe didn't actually need their maintenance. The sun rose without sacrifice before humans existed, and will continue rising long after we're extinct. The cosmos is indifferent to human ritual. From a certain perspective, all that effort, all that blood, all that anxiety, it was for nothing, based on a complete misunderstanding of how reality works. But from another perspective, it was for everything. It gave millions of people across centuries a framework for understanding their existence, a sense of purpose, a connection to forces larger than themselves, and a community bound by shared cosmic responsibility. The meaning was real, even if the metaphysics was wrong. The civilization they built on those false premises was genuine. The art, the architecture, the poetry, the social organization, all real, all valuable, all worthy of remembering and studying, despite being built on a cosmology we now know was mistaken. This is the tragedy and fascination of the Aztecs. They were profoundly wrong about reality's fundamental nature, but they were also sophisticated, intelligent, capable of complex abstract thought, and absolutely sincere in their beliefs. They weren't foolish or primitive. They were human, doing what humans always do, creating meaning from chaos, building systems to explain the inexplicable, finding ways to feel in control of an overwhelming universe. We do the same, just with different tools and frameworks. Our scientific worldview is more accurate, more predictive, more useful for manipulating the physical world. But it's still a human construction, still a meaning-making system, still an attempt to impose order on the vast complexity of existence. We're not as different from the Aztecs as we like to think. We're just working with better data and different conclusions. As you drift towards sleep now, or if you're already sleeping, or if you've been asleep for hours and these words are just gentle sounds washing over your unconscious mind, consider this. You live in a world the Aztecs couldn't imagine. A world where the sun rises automatically, where gods either don't exist or don't demand blood, where cosmic maintenance is no one's responsibility, where you're free to live according to your own choices within broad social constraints, but without spiritual terror. This is an extraordinary gift, this disenchanted universe. You can make plans without consulting calendar priests. You can ignore omens. You can sleep without worrying that your dreams require divine interpretation. You can eat without making offerings first. You can look at birds and see birds, not cosmic messages. You can experience natural phenomena without reading divine displeasure into every earthquake or drought. But perhaps, just perhaps, there's also loss in this freedom. The Aztecs lived in a meaningful universe, however terrifying. Every action mattered cosmically. They were participants in maintaining reality, not just observers of a mechanistic cosmos that would function identically without them. There's something profound in feeling essential to existence, even if that feeling was based on incorrect understanding. You're not essential to existence. Neither am I. The universe operated for billions of years without humans, and will continue for billions more after we're extinct. The sun doesn't care about us. The cosmos is indifferent. This is scientifically accurate and existentially challenging. The Aztecs were wrong, but at least they felt they mattered. Perhaps the task for modern humans is finding meaning without cosmic necessity, building lives of purpose in a universe that doesn't require our participation, creating significance despite indifference. We can't return to Aztec enchantment. We know too much. We've seen too far. We understand too deeply that the old cosmologies were beautiful mistakes. But we can honor the impulse that drove them, the human need for meaning that transcends mere survival. The Religious Stories for Sleep channel exists partly for this purpose, to remind you that humans have always sought meaning, always created elaborate systems, always tried to understand existence beyond the mundane. The Aztecs with their blood and calendars, the Egyptians with their pyramids and afterlife preparations, the Greeks with their philosophical inquiries, the Christians with their quest for salvation, the Buddhists with their path to enlightenment. All different, all human, all attempts to make existence meaningful. You don't need to maintain the universe. The sun will rise tomorrow without your blood. The gods, if they exist at all, don't require your constant attention. You're free, in ways the Aztecs would have found incomprehensible, to simply exist without cosmic obligation. That's the gift of modernity, purchased with the loss of cosmic enchantment. As you sink deeper into rest now, let the strangeness of the Aztec world fade into comfortable distance. They're gone. Their gods are silent. Their temples are ruins. Their calendar systems are archaeological curiosities. The cosmic anxiety they lived with daily is not yours to carry. You're safe in your disenchanted universe, free from divine demands, released from the exhausting work of maintaining reality. The story is over. The Aztecs have fallen silent across 5 centuries and an unbridgeable cultural gap. What remains is memory, fragments, and the strange echo of their voices asking questions we still ask, even if we no longer accept their answers. Why does the sun rise? What makes life meaningful? How do we maintain order against chaos? What do we owe to forces larger than ourselves? They answered with blood and prayer and calendar wheels spinning through eternity. We answer differently. Neither answer is complete. Both are human. And that, perhaps, is the real lesson. Humans are meaning-making creatures, and will create elaborate systems to impose order on chaos, regardless of whether those systems are accurate. The Aztecs built magnificently on false premises. We build differently on premises we think are true, knowing future generations may view our certainties as we view theirs, with a mixture of respect for the effort and sadness for the misdirection. Sleep now, if you haven't already. Dream whatever dreams come, unafraid that they're divine messages requiring interpretation. Wake tomorrow to a sun that rises automatically, to a day free from cosmic obligation, to a life that's yours to shape within reasonable constraints, but without divine terror. The Aztecs would have envied you this freedom, this release from maintaining the universe, this simple gift of existence without eternal responsibility. Thank you for joining this journey through one of history's strangest and most fascinating religious worlds. If you found this helpful for sleep, consider subscribing to Religious Stories for Sleep. Leave a comment suggesting which historical period or religious tradition you'd like explored next. Like the video if you enjoyed it, though whether you did or simply used it to drift off doesn't really matter. The goal is rest, and if these words provided that, they've fulfilled their purpose. Good night, dear listener. May you sleep well, dream peacefully, and wake refreshed to your modern, disenchanted, wonderfully manageable universe, where the only obligations you carry are human scale and blessedly temporal. The Aztecs maintained the cosmos. You need only maintain yourself. That's gift enough for any lifetime. The sun will rise tomorrow, not because anyone bled for it, not because any ritual was performed correctly, not because the gods demanded it. The sun will rise because that's what stars do, mechanistically, indifferently, reliably. And that's beautiful in its own way, that predictable, uncaring regularity that requires nothing from you except, perhaps, appreciation, if you're so inclined. Rest now. The story is complete. The gods are silent. The universe continues without your effort. Sleep